Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about Nick Fuentes, a common topic on the podcast. He's very prevalent, a very high profile individual. And, ever since, you could say 2024, ever since he got on Rumble, he's sort of been on a generational run, as he would call it. And he's right to call it that. He's been everywhere. He's been on all the major podcasts. He's been in the news constantly. He's gone viral on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, or X. All the platforms that used to ban him or still ban him, people will post his clips, and he's extremely popular. And if you've listened to the podcast before, I'm not like the biggest fan of his, but I'm also not the biggest critic. I'm a little bit sympathetic to him based on what happened to him when he was a young man, and the fact that you had conservative ink try to strangle him in the crib, so to speak, before he was really starting to become his own person. When he was working at RSBN, you had people like Ben Shapiro when Nick Fuentes was like an 18-year-old trying to cancel him immediately because he was critical of Israel. And I think that was bad. I'm not, I'm sympathetic to Fuentes, and I think that's maybe why he is the person he is today. Not defending him for some of the more controversial things he said, as we'll discuss here, but I can understand it. But Fuentes said something recently regarding Jeffrey Epstein that has created more controversy, and I wanted to talk about that because I think it shows a little bit of hypocrisy on his part. But before we get into it all, I need you to do something for me, folks. It's so simple. Even a child could do it. Even a Democrat could do it. Even a Groyper could do it. No, I'm just kidding. Groypers are smart. I need you to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Please subscribe. And if you are listening on the YouTubes, like and comment. It helps a great deal with the algorithm. I would greatly appreciate it. So, like I said, Nick Fuentes was talking about Jeffrey Epstein. And, people, I'm assuming, know the story about Jeffrey Epstein. He was like this rich guy who owned an island, who got prosecuted for having sex with a 17-year-old. And there were accusations of more illicit contact, perhaps even having a blackmailing operation, accusations of him working with Mossad, working for the CIA, and basically like an intelligence blackmailing operation. Now, a lot of that stuff hasn't been confirmed, or disproven, I guess you could say, although it's sort of ridiculous trying to prove it, disprove negative. But the Trump administration has mishandled the Epstein files, as everyone here knows, and it's created more distrust in the public and what exactly the Trump administration has been hiding and what exactly Jeffrey Epstein was up to when he was alive. Now, you do have people, contrarians, people like Michael Tracy, who have been sort of debunking many of the conspiracy theories regarding Jeffrey Epstein. Again, there isn't a lot of evidence he was actually, operating a blackmailing operation. Whether or not he killed himself is a different question. It is a little bit weird. He was in a facility where it's supposed to be impossible to kill yourself, and then he killed himself, so I don't know. You tell me how that worked. But in terms of the actual claim of him working for Mossad, the CIA, and it being sort of like an intelligence operation to blackmail high-profile individuals, not a lot of evidence for that. But what there is evidence for is that he did have sex with a minor back in the 2000s, and he actually was prosecuted, and he did go to jail or prison, whatever the specific one it was, for I think a year, and he had sex with a 17-year-old. Now, what was happening with Epstein was, when he was in Florida, he had like a resort or he had some club, and he would hire local women to give massages at his club. Now, some of these women were underage. They weren't all 18-year-olds. They were 17, 16, maybe even as young as 14, according to, I think, legal documents, according to Michael Tracy's reporting. And now, we don't know to the extent the sexual, contact Epstein had with these women on massages. Obviously, a man in his 40s, 50s should not be hiring teenage girls that are underage to give massages, even if there was nothing explicitly sexual happening. That's not something you do. That's not a responsible thing to do. I don't care who the hell you are. You don't do that. Now, it is true. I think even if you look at some of these legal documents, some of these women were supposedly lying about their ages to get hired by Epstein's club. Now, again, if you're actually hiring these women, if you're paying these women, it's on you to verify these, the ages of these women, right? Like, you can't just take their word for it. If you're going to be doing a massage thing, which is a little bit risque in and of itself, and you're looking for teenage girls specifically, you have to verify their ages. I mean, you just have to do that. So that's, even if these girls were lying, that doesn't really take Epstein off the hook. You got to verify their ages. You got to be responsible. And it is true that one woman, some girl, I should say, had sex with him, I think, shortly before she turned 18. And that's what he was prosecuted for, and I think maybe a prostitution charge as well, because he was paying these women, this girl. And he had sex with her when she was a minor. Now, but that is to the extent of the fact, that is all the evidence we have, though, of Epstein actually engaging in, explicit sexual activity with a minor. Okay, like I said, the blackmailing operation, him having sex with girls younger than 17, there isn't any evidence of that. Maybe some sexual conduct with a 16-year-old, but in terms of explicit sexual intercourse, hate to use that word, but that's the word to use. There isn't a lot of evidence, if any evidence, that Epstein was actually engaging in pedophilia. But now, Nick Fuentes was commenting on this because he was wearing like his jacket, like one of Epstein's jacket. And Fuentes sort of had a hot take about the whole Epstein thing. And I'm going to play the clip now, and then I'm going to explain to you why I have a problem with what he said.
It's like, is it really pedophilia? I don't want to be the one that has to say it, but I guess I'm being forced to say it. It's not really pedophilia, okay? They weren't trafficking 5-year-olds. It was like they were technically not legal. Big difference, in my opinion. I know that's a controversial take, but that's not really the issue there. Okay? The issue is not that they were barely legal teens, which is what it is. It's horrendous. It's awful. It's pedophilia. Okay, relax. No, the issue is that Epstein is a Jewish spy probably working with Israel. That's the dilemma there. He's working with Israeli intelligence. You got to be the villain. Epstein's my boy, dude. Let's just be honest. Epstein was cool as fuck. There, I said it. What are you going to do? Go ahead, cancel me. Yeah, I said it. Jeffrey Epstein was cool as fuck. Now what? Go ahead, cancel me. Do it. So sometimes we have to be the villain. Sometimes we have to be on a villain arc. That's okay. I'll be a little unpopular. I've been unpopular before. You niggas are not ready for that conversation, but Jeff Epstein, not a pedophile, but you're not ready for that conversation. All of his victims, 14 to 17. That's not pedophilia. But y'all niggas ain't ready for that conversation. People say that's normalizing pedophilia. No, that's defining pedophilia.
Okay, so the reason I have a little bit of a problem with this is, number one, some of these girls were as young as 14, as Fuentes even acknowledged. Now, like I said, there's no direct evidence Epstein actually had, like I said, intercourse with a 14-year-old girl. But it's very possible he was having some sort of sexual contact with her. I mean, if you ever, there are the things called happy ending massages. At the very least, that's very plausible. Epstein was engaging with that type of sexual contact with a 14-year-old, which is just gross. And, you could say that's not really pedophilia to have sexual contact with the 14 to 17-year-olds, but it's like, certainly a 14, 15-year-old it is. I mean, think of it, put yourself in the victim's shoes. Do you think that you could have totally consensually engaged with sexual contact with a 40, 50-year-old man when you were 14 or 15? No, that's very intimidating. It's just not right. It's just sort of that's not something you want to have to deal with. And I understand many of these girls chose to work for Epstein, but they were minors. They didn't know better. They were just trying to make money so they could go shopping right afterwards and go to the mall. It was an opportunity for them, but they were being taken advantage of by someone who had plenty of money, who could have hired women of age. And look, in terms of the age of consent, I don't really want to get into this because it's such a it's just a topic that no one can talk about rationally. It is true that Florida, the age of consent is 18, and so is it, nationally, the federal age of consent is 18. And it is true that is one of the more, it's on the higher end of the age of consent. Many other countries, it's 17 or 16. Many of our states have their own ages of consent that range between 16 to 18. So I understand the point, but some of these girls that were giving these massages were younger than 16. And look, if the age of consent in your state is 18, that's not an unreasonable age of consent. It's just not unreasonable. Like if the age of consent was like 23, that would be unreasonable because a 22-year-old can have consensual sex. I don't care what the law says. Whether or not a 16-year-old can have consensual sex with a 40-something-year-old, that's a different question. And I get it, some states that is the age of consent, some countries that's the age of consent. I'm not really advocating one way or the other. But some of these girls were younger than 16, even if there wasn't explicit intercourse, there was probably sexual conduct done with these 15, 14-year-olds. And that's not good. And the problem I have with Fuentes saying this is he was ripping the Trump administration for how Trump was handling the Epstein files. I mean, this is what Fuentes posted on X back in July of last year. He said this, quote, "Let us never forget that 1 year ago our president Donald Trump was spared from sudden death by God. Trump took a bullet so that he could live to cover up Epstein's pedophile island and to bomb Iran for Israel." Now that last line is totally fair game because the bombing of Iran was gay plus retarded. But he's saying here that he's criticizing Trump for covering up essentially a pedophile ring, even though, like I said, there's no evidence for that. And then, back in the summer as well, he said this about Trump. He said this on X as well, quote, "There is zero doubt in my mind that Trump is named in the Epstein files. Elon is telling the truth," because that was when Elon was accusing Trump of being in the Epstein files. Now, my problem is that in here, he is criticizing the Trump administration, accusing Trump of covering up essentially a pedophile ring. But now he's saying that Jeffrey Epstein's like a cool guy and that there's nothing wrong with having, sexual contact with someone of the age of 14 to 17. Like, I'm sorry, that's a little bit hypocritical to me. It's like, really? What changed over the last... The thing has changed. The evidence is the same. There's always been a lack of true evidence of there being a pedophile ring. So Fuentes was willing to criticize the Trump administration and Donald Trump himself for covering up a pedophile ring, which is one of the worst things you could do, to play cover for a pedophile. But now we sing Epstein's like a cool guy. It's like, well, now you're doing what you accuse the Trump administration of doing. You're totally defending a pedophile. And again, there's been no change of evidence. So like, what's the turn? And the reason why I think is because Fuentes at his core is a contrarian. He likes to go against the grain. And, there used to be the contrarian take was that Epstein had a pedophile ring. Now the more contrarian take is that he didn't, and then having, sex with minors is like okay, as long as they're at least the age of 14. If you listen to the clip I played, like disgusting stuff, but that's what he said. I played the clip. You can't accuse me of being dishonest. So Fuentes just wants to be contrarian, and this sort of goes to the broader point. This is why I don't like him that much. There are things about him that I think he's obviously extremely talented. He's more talented than me. He's extremely articulate. He's extremely knowledgeable. He's, very charismatic. I'm not taking any of his talents away from him or his natural ability or the knowledge that he's accumulated. I would never take that away from him. But at his core, he likes being contrarian. He likes being a troll, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's one of the reasons why I don't think his movement's ever going to get serious traction, to the extent that it hasn't gotten serious traction, because fundamentally, Fuentes likes being a contrarian, and you can't be a contrarian and be, you can't govern while being a contrarian. At a certain point, you need to have majority support, and you have majority support, by definition, you can't be contrarian anymore because you are the majority. The other problem with the whole Groyper America First movement is that at some point, it may be better for the movement if Fuentes takes a back seat because of all the controversial things he said. But Fuentes has made it extremely clear that he'll never take a back seat. And that, one of the litmus tests Fuentes has when he endorses certain people for government, people like Joe Kent, is whether or not they'll disavow him. If they'll disavow him, he won't support them anymore. That's what happened to Joe Kent. Joe Kent released a statement criticizing Fuentes after Fuentes had endorsed him, and Fuentes then removed his endorsement, which, like, I could understand that. At the same time, though, if you actually care about the issues more than you care about interpersonal politics, the fact that someone is creating distance from you so they can get elected, you should ultimately be okay with that if you think that person has the right policy agenda. Because someone's policy agenda is separate to whether or not they want to condemn an individual who said very controversial things, like Fuentes has said. Many of the things may have been jokes, not serious, or just rhetoric to make a point. But those things have impacts too, and people aren't always going to be willing to, you know, you know, with the media being so dishonest, when you have an endorsement of someone as controversial as Fuentes, sometimes, even if you don't want to do it, uh, releasing a statement, creating distance is just politically the smart thing to do. And the Groypers have to understand that, or they're, like I said, they're never going to be a significant force in American politics. At least that's my take. I could be wrong. Again, Fuentes is super talented. He could overcome all that. Maybe he'll run for public office himself, and the problem is sort of fixes himself in terms of having to deal with people condemning him when they're running for office. But again, with this Epstein thing, it just shows to me that at his core, Fuentes wants to be contrarian, which I'm sympathetic to. I like being a contrarian too. I think a lot of younger men, white men particularly, in their 20s, teenagers, like being contrarians. I totally get it, but it's sort of hard to take you seriously when you're going to accuse the Trump administration for covering up a pedophile ring, but then the last couple of days saying that Jeffrey Epstein was a cool guy and that there's nothing wrong with having sexual contact with girls as young as 14 years old. I think that's an L take, but, maybe let me know in the comments what you think. Am I being unfair to him? Am I being unreasonable? I know you Groypers will let me know when you think I'm being unfair to him, so let me know. I think I'm being pretty fair, but let me know in the comments. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. We should be back tomorrow. Again, please subscribe, whether on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Greatly appreciate it. And you are listening on the YouTube, like and comment helps a lot. We should be back tomorrow. We might be back later tonight. Because I took last week off, I'm doing, I think, 2 episodes a day for this week. I think. So we might be back tonight. If not, we'll definitely be back tomorrow. Hope you have a good day, folks. Bye-bye.